Can't even eat a quarter pounder or deer now. They said that what caused the listeria outbreak at McDonald's was onions. I've heard it all now. Didn't know onions could be that bad. You've been watching the World Series?
I have not.
I haven't watched
Friend of mine's gonna get on a plane going tomorrow.
Really? New York City?
Yep.
I'd like to go if it was Yankee Stadium.
I wouldn't mind being at Madison Square Garden.
Oh boy, that was kind of a gift yesterday.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Brandon Taylor. I'm the chairman of the Lawrence County Republican Party.
And I'm Chris Jackson, chairman of the Lawrence County Democratic Party.
And we've been working on a series, and Chris and I have just had a good conversation a few minutes before we went live. And we've got a couple more episodes we're going to put out there. We've got next week, of course, the day before election. Then we have to tell Kamala Harris she's fired. So we're going to do that. I don't know if you want to do that on Monday or with the following week. We could have another one and do a conclusion to our series.
We could, but I'm planning on a victory party.
Well, somebody's going to have one.
Yeah, and somebody's going to be crying. I just hope we can all act like adults somewhere along the line afterwards.
I agree. So, Chris, I want to thank you again for coming in and being willing to sit down. I know we've got some feedback from folks, and the hour goes by pretty quick. And I think we got a couple of comments, and we can jump in this however you want to. We got some that you had on there. Do you have them ready, or you want to go over those?
Yeah, we can.
How do you want to open this up?
And we just we have one right now from Lee Whitley. Said appreciate you guys having these debates. Lee's a buddy of mine from the south end of the county, so
you're welcome.
It's been fun. I mean, I think we've had fun, and I think the people have been able to hear both sides in a fashion that you don't often hear nowadays, especially locally.
Well, and Chris and I were talking just before we went live, and you and I have had conversations to where if I were to walk into the room and someone was a Democrat and they were having a conversation, they'd probably drop off the conversation. Or if I'm talking to someone and it leads down some of the rabbit trails we go down, we change the subject.
Right.
And for people who are listening, the hard part for Chris and I is that we don't change the subject.
Yeah.
We power on through it, and sometimes we agree to just disagree and we move along. Yeah. But I appreciate the fact of getting to give my opinion, and I appreciate your opinion as well, because we become empowered as a people when we bring our ideas into the room. So I appreciate that.
One of the comments is actually from Lee Whitley. He posted on WLX earlier, and he wanted our thoughts on the comments that occurred during the rally at Madison Square Garden yesterday.
Sure, yeah. And Lee, we were going to have to get to that. Of course, it's been all.
You knew I was going to have to get to it. I don't know how well.
Write it down. I knew I didn't write it down on topics I want to talk about, because I'm like, I know Chris has got it all. I did. With that. Yeah, that's fine.
Absolutely. And if you guys don't know what we're talking about, Donald Trump he packed the place out at Madison Square Garden yesterday in New York City. Yeah. Big crowd, but it kind of went off the rails. And I'll admit, it wasn't Donald Trump that said it. It was his supporters that kind of led up to him being the speaker. And I'll just go over some of the highlights to tell you what the controversy is. They had a comedian, Tony Hinchcliffe, who spoke before Trump, and he was one of the opening acts who made several offensive comments. One among several was that he called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. He made crude sexual comments about Latinos and their reproductive habits. He used a racist stereotype talking about watermelons and black people. He also made derogatory comments about Palestinians and Jews. Another Trump supporter who introduced the former president liking Vice President Harris and her advisors to pimp handlers, and another one called her the Antichrist. So, what do you think about all that, Brandon?
Well, I know the comedian, he was absolutely making a lot of comments. And someone asked me about it earlier today, and I said, I don't think he left anyone out. I think he pretty much bashed everyone. He even, bashed rednecks and, even homosexuals. He didn't leave anyone out. He's an equal opportunity offender. And I, I will tell you that I've seen comedy change so much in this country, though, in the last 20 years. Probably 25 years ago when I was younger, you wouldn't have had any kickback on this.
Yeah.
I don't think people can laugh at themselves very well. I saw the headlines on this, and I didn't watch the entire rally this morning. I got up and the headlines were already rolling first thing this morning, very very early before the sun came up. They were already had comments on this,
Yeah.
so I went back and listened to him, and he even made fun of himself, and maybe in the light of trying to be funny and really push for freedom of speech. Maybe he thought he would do that,
Yeah.
but if I were running for president, would I have done that? No. I mean, that's
Well, you're
I wouldn't
you're
want someone to come in and open my show up with that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want.
well, you're a better man than Donald Trump. That's one reason, but I think it was a kind of Donald Trump campaign. You guys have been closing in the polls in recent weeks, and it seemed like there may be a little momentum. May not be. Who knows? According to polls, though, Trump has closed the gap in the national average and the swing states.
Right.
And now the media's focused on this. Whether it will hurt Trump, I don't know. But, I've never seen anything like this at a political rally. Comedy's one thing, and, people buy tickets to go see comedians, and, there's shock value in things like
Mhm.
that. But I think this feeds into a larger narrative with Donald Trump that he's anti immigrant, that he's offensive to women, that he's offensive just about to anybody who's not white. You know, you said he talked about rednecks. Well, those were kind of the least of his comments. He touched on just about everybody. And, making comment or jokes about black folks and watermelons and, the sexual habits of Puerto Ricans. I don't find it funny. That some people may do that, but I don't. And I think it's a poor reflection on the Republican Party. And I just think it's something else you guys have to defend with Donald Trump.
Well, I'll say this: when you go to a rally like that, and you have a rally as a politician, you're there to get votes.
Yeah.
You don't want to run off your constituents. So, if you want to make fun of Harris or you want to make fun of Tim Walz or Biden, they're more fair game
Yeah.
than trying to go after folks that you're trying to gain their vote. You don't want to do that.
There's 500,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania.
Right.
And as close as Pennsylvania is going to be, it's likely to come down to maybe 10,000 votes. Just like it did last time. It's going to be razor thin.
It could.
And these comments very well could offend enough in
Is
that.
this an October surprise?
That's what somebody told me today. Everybody's been wondering,
Yeah.
where's the October surprise? Well,
Right.
surprise.
Right.
It was Donald Trump's own people.
Well, all I can say on it is I wouldn't have done it if it were me. And we can sit here and Monday morning armchair, quarterback armchair, and it's like I don't know why people would think that would help you get votes and pull people in because it's not going to gain him any ground whatsoever.
Oh, absolutely.
You would hope
It doesn't help.
that people would be able to say, well, take it in light of a joke. And we know it was a joke. We know he was a comedian. He was walking out there under the total premise that he was going to be telling jokes. But no one likes to be the butt of a joke. So that's where.
And Brandon, again, it's just bizarre to see the Republican Party who, 8 years ago at the opening of a political rally would open with a prayer for Jerry Falwell or, Franklin Graham or one of these big pastors to see a political rally now being opened up by a comedian who's made his mark on crude sexual and racist jokes.
I'm not familiar with this comedian. Are you familiar with him?
I've seen him a couple times. He was on the Tom Brady roast
Okay.
on Netflix. That's really the only place that I've seen him, other than a few clips where he goes after the politicians and stuff. But he's kind of one of those, like I said, it does his with shock value. And
He reminds me of old school Don Rickles.
Yeah.
If you've ever watched, younger generation may not remember him, but Don
Google
Rickles.
him.
Yeah, Google it, because if you listen to Don Rickles, you're going to see how he's trying to, capture that kind of spirit of
Yeah.
Don Rickles is a comedian, which I never followed Don Rickles, but it's exactly what he sounded like and he did a lot of political stuff that Don Rickles did. So who knows? I'd say a lot of experimental stuff's happened during this election cycle. I would have never thought that was going to happen. It was different than what I've ever seen
And they
before.
said they had to edit out one of his jokes that was even cruder, that was about Kamala Harris. It was going to be calling her a derogatory name that I will definitely not repeat on there because we may want to come back at some point. But they did edit that out. You just have to wonder if you're the Trump campaign, why didn't you edit those out?
Well, I will tell you this though. I'm glad that they put it out there.
Yeah.
And if it happens, it happens. And some things happen when you're doing live events. And you run a lot of unscripted stuff. You and I are in here and we're unscripted. We try to be self-controlled and
Yeah.
and be on that, and we count on each other. I'm counting on you to do your part. I'm doing my part. And so when you come in, who knows? Did a guy go off script? Did he do something? I have no idea. I wouldn't have
definitely wouldn't have-
expected that to happen.
You definitely wouldn't have been saying that at a Ron DeSantis rally.
No, I don't think you would see that at very many campaign
No.
rallies whatsoever. But
This is the
poor
problem.
taste.
Yeah, well, and like I said, this is the problem with Donald Trump. You guys are constantly having to defend him, and I know you don't want to defend him because you don't approve of that kind of stuff, and most Republicans don't. And it just seems like to me, and I'm not going to give you advice because, I think Donald Trump being the nominee is probably one of the few that we can defeat this cycle. But I mean, you guys would have been so much better off nominating somebody else that's a grown adult, that acts like an adult, that's a serious player. But here we are just a week away from the election. And
Well, when it happened,
It's a dead
first,
heat.
I'll give you this. When I first saw it, I said, well, that happened. I saw it on Monday morning, and I said, well, at least Chris is going to have some,
I've got
some
material.
content. He's got some content for
I
tonight.
was like,
It-
thank you, Lord. It was Sunday, it's like a prayer answered, and
Oh,
it
well,
could be the deciding factor. Who
and,
knows?
well, here the thing is, let's think about this, though. 30 years ago, people weren't as easily offended.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest. I mean, when I was a kid, Jeff Foxworthy made a fortune of being offensive.
Yeah.
And he made redneck jokes about my family. Okay. I know he was talking about my family.
Yeah.
and we bought his cassette tapes back then and CDs. But would you bring someone like that to a political rally?
That's
Probably
the
not.
question.
And so you got to know your audience. I don't think this is necessarily going to cost him an election, but every vote does count during this
That's right.
political cycle. And you want to bring people in and you want to bring unity in.
Yeah.
So you just got to know. Like I said, I think we're going to hear more about what exactly happened. Did the guy go off the rails? I never heard of him.
Yeah.
First time I ever heard of him was yesterday. I never heard of the guy before a
It's
month.
going to be interesting on his part to see whether this actually helps his career or maybe doesn't help him. A lot of folks benefit from this kind of
Oh,
shot
he's going to
value.
get some clicks.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. You get clicks from.
He'll
from
be
being
endeared to
shot.
the right wing. There's no doubt
I think
about
he's
that.
part of the Joe Rogan group. I think
Yeah.
but I don't follow Joe Rogan, so
Either.
I don't know much about him. But
Since we just talked a little bit about the polling, do you want to go over it?
yeah, that's all.
We've got, since we go over this every week, we'll give you an update again today. It seems like each week these things get closer and closer.
Mhm.
Right now, the national average has Kamala Harris only up by 0.7. And if you remember a few weeks ago, I think she was about 2.5 point on average lead nationally. Some of the swing states that we always talk about, they've gotten even closer. Nevada is now, Trump is leading there 0.3. In Pennsylvania, Harris is ahead 0.3. Wisconsin, Harris is ahead 0.4. Georgia, Trump is ahead 0.9. So he's opened up a slight lead in Georgia. North Carolina is now 1.1. And Michigan, Harris has opened up a little bit of a lead at 1.1. Arizona, Trump is getting a little bit of traction there. He's now up 1.7. And as we talked about before we went live, if you signed all these swing states to who's leading there right now, guess what the result is in the Electoral College? It's 269 to 269. So it would be a tie.
Which we don't really want.
Eh.
We want a solid win.
Exactly. And for those that don't know what happens when there's a tie in the Electoral College, it goes to the House of Representatives.
Right.
And it doesn't go by the majority of who controls the House per se. It goes by House delegations for each state, which Republicans should win because they control most of the state delegations.
Right.
But in a situation like that, who knows? Because there'll be trade-offs and everything else, and it would only bring this country to its knees again. We want a clear winner.
Yeah, it would be a very divisive time. But Brad, I see you think the notion that Foxworthy was at any point considered edgy or offensive is ludicrous. Well, in some circles, if you are talking about rednecks the same way you're talking about other people, then yeah, you're saying it could be offensive. And to this generation, and let me finish out my thought on that. I probably didn't do a very good job finishing it, but we're talking about a woke generation now that's very offended. I mean, just being honest. I
Yeah.
mean, they are offended. We were not as offended in 1995, and that was my point. We were not as offended as a culture.
Yeah.
Now, if you say anything, it's offensive. And the wokeism, the bad part about that, Brad, is they try to cancel culture you.
Yeah.
And I don't like cancel culture. I don't want to cancel anyone. Matter of fact, I like to hear people's opinion. I love this country for freedom.
Republicans hate cancel culture so long as they're canceling a Democrat.
Well, I don't want to cancel anyone.
They tried to cancel me a couple months ago because I made a comment about Trump when I was on the election commission. Of course, I stepped down to do this job because it was a partisan position that we're having here on this show. But, Republicans have to be consistent. You're either for cancel culture or you're not. Everybody has a freedom of speech, and we're not going to agree. But it always seems to me, Republicans say we're for freedom of speech until you talk about Donald Trump or something they don't like. Then they're the ones wanting to go after your job, your position, whatever. And I'm with you. You shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, I don't like cancel culture at all. Let's see. You had something else. I know we had a comment you and I talked about.
From Jennifer Thompson. She said, I would like an opinion on how so many people, particularly those in clergy, hold Donald Trump as a saint when in fact his track record includes multiple convictions, sexual assaults on women, openly degrading women, making fun of disabled people, and criticizing soldiers who have been captured. And I'm sure she's alluding to his comments about John McCain.
Right.
So
I feel like that was directed toward me.
Thanks,
I'll take that. What was the lady's first name?
Jennifer.
Jennifer, thank you for your comment, your question. I will tell you right now that I believe that there's no difference in Harris or Trump. I think we're all people. I think God created us all the same. I think we're all made in his image. So first off, I don't think anyone's better than anyone. I don't think Chris is better than me. I don't think I'm better than Chris. I think we're all the same.
Yep.
What I will tell you, I look at people's policies. I have to look at the politicians' policies, because if you truly believe that one person's not better than the other, then the only thing left is to look at their policies. And I 100% look at their policies, and I believe that Trump's policies are better than Harris's policies. And that's where I go back to. But it's not because I think that he is a better Christian, or I've heard those terms of, they made fun of George Bush back in the day when he would say, "You're not going to out Christian me," and it's like, I don't think that's even that's not even on the landscape right now. It's not relative for what we're doing. What we're doing here in politics is we bring the arena of ideas. Now, if someone were an unbeliever and I'm a believer. I'm unapologetic.
Do you think Donald Trump's a believer?
I think he is a believer. Okay. I do.
I'm not going to question it.
Well, I do. I can't. Would I say that he believes the same way I do? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't.
Snow, his actions aren't very Christ-like in most situations.
Well, I mean, but you could pick both part. You could pick her part too. I mean,
it's a matter of degree. Everybody's a sinner.
Right.
We're not going to get into religion, but it's a matter of degree. And yes, I'm sure she's a sinner just like I am and everybody else is. But Donald Trump is just an obvious walking. I don't know what you would call it.
Think about it like this. Here's my point. If you wanted to pick people apart by their life, and you could take Donald Trump, you'd like, well, he's been married several times. He's had extramarital affairs, whatever you want to
paid off porn star.
Well, let's look at this. Biden did the same thing. Biden had extramarital affairs. His wife, Biden did. Jill Biden was divorced and then married Joe Biden. She went through a divorce. And they got married. I mean,
Joe Biden's first wife died in a car accident.
Right, but not Jill's first husband, though. So, but think about this. Let's go to Harris, because Biden's not even on the ballot.
Yeah.
You guys took him off. Let's go to Harris. Harris, we see all the things that she did out there with Brown. What's his first name? Willie Brown. What's his first name?
He was a single woman.
Okay, but here's the thing. We're talking about.
You guys know that's a false equivalency. Donald Trump's been.
No, not to me. To me, if sex outside of wedlock is sin.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where I'm going with it. And so if I'm going to sit here and break it down and be like, well, hers wasn't as bad as his, it's kind of like, give me a break.
He's got a lot more subject material.
He has lived one more of a life. I will tell you. Who would have thought he'd ever been president? Who would have thought that this would ever happen?
Not me.
And I'm not trying to defend him. I'm just telling you, you asked the question, but I don't even relate the two as personality type. When I look at her policies, when I look at his policies, I go with the policies.
I think what Jennifer's probably alluding to, and we've talked about it on the show,
I
and
definitely don't think he's a saint, Jennifer. Okay.
oh no, there won't be any. What do they call it when they anoint somebody as a saint in the Catholic Church?
I don't know. I'm not Catholic.
Beatification. But anyway, I think what she's probably alluding to, we've talked about it on this show. I have a hard time reconciling the old Republican Party of the Christian conservatives like George Bush with this new Republican Party who is just so enamored with Donald Trump, with his multiple convictions, his lying all the time, his deceitfulness, his talking about women, talking about minorities. I mean, it's just hard to reconcile the two. And you did as good a job as anybody I've heard on our last show talking about that you vote on policies. But
Well, I have to.
well, you have to in the situation. But I think if the shoe was on the other foot, you would be dinging us completely, and it would be warranted if we had somebody with the character of Donald Trump. And let me say, the position of President of the United States, one of the chief things that every historian and anybody that knows anything about U.S. history, president has to have moral authority and they have to have character in order to inspire people, in order to convince people, in order to lead this country. And Donald Trump is devoid of character. He has none. I mean, I can think of hardly anybody that's in the Republican Party that would have less character than Donald Trump. And that's my biggest thing against the guy. I've always said, and I wrote a letter when he first got elected to the editor when I was a commissioner. And I said, Democrats need to come together and support Donald Trump because he's the president now, and it's good for the country if the president succeeds.
Sure.
But the guy there's never an inch that he gives to try to work with people. It's always just like we saw yesterday with the comments running down immigrants, running down women. There's never any grace with him or the people that surround him. And I think that's a big problem moving forward with the Republican Party.
Well, I come to this radio show and sit down and talk to a Democrat, and I want to see us pull as best candidates as we can. When you look at the Democrat Party, when you look at the Republican Party, and you look at the chairmans, your job as a chairman is to go for this candidate you can find.
Win an election.
Would I sit here and tell you that I believe that Harris and Trump are the best two in this country to run this as a president? No. But let me ask the question, where are the others at?
Right.
Well, you don't have, and I'll make this joke, you get the choice when you go up to the voting booth, you get the choice of Pepsi and Diet Pepsi.
It's a binary choice.
And because we're down to two parties. So here's what happens. Both parties have to be pulled very similar. That's why you see, and the media goes after people and goes after candidates, and they'll say, well, they're flip-flopping. Well, with two parties, you're going to have to pull them so close together to get someone elected, to make them electable.
Right.
And what's electable in the state of Tennessee is not necessarily electable as a Republican in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Okay. And the same thing goes for a Democrat. What's electable as a Democrat in Memphis is not going to be the same thing what's electable in San Francisco. So what happens with two parties is you're constantly pulling to that center.
Yeah.
What I see is we should be going after better candidates, but with cancel culture, with going after their families, and I've been in here for.
How has Donald Trump not been canceled?
I'm sorry.
How has Donald Trump not been canceled?
Well, they've tried to cancel him.
Oh, I know. Nothing.
And they try to cancel. What I'm saying is they try to cancel any candidate.
Yeah.
And my goal is to come in and let's look at better policies. We've got to move the ball forward.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, we've got to come up with good ideas. We've got to come up with intellectual conversation. I guess we could sit here, you and I, Chris, could sit here and go, well, Harris had a boyfriend, Trump had a girlfriend. It's kind of like, what? I mean, that sounds like playground stuff to me. But when we sit here and we go, okay, what do we need for our economy? What do we need for our citizens to live better lives? What's it going to take to get grocery prices down?
Yeah.
What's it going to take to get housing where it needs to be, healthcare where it needs to be? What do we need to do on these topics? And I know personality plays into it, but if the policy's bad, I'm telling you.
It would just be interesting to see what Republicans' reaction would be if Barack Obama had 3 children by 3 different baby mamas and paid off a porn star while his wife was pregnant. That's what I would like to see. And I think you know the answer to that. But, we'll get off of that. We can talk back and forth on the issue of character all day, but I think what I'm concerned about more than anything is Donald Trump's authoritarian tendencies. And last week, we had General John Kelly, a former four-star Marine general who was his chief of staff for 3 years, come out and say that Donald Trump was a fascist. I mean, I never want to throw those kind of words around, but this is somebody that worked for Donald Trump, saw him up close,
Right.
lost a son in the Afghanistan war. So, I mean, I think everybody can see that this is a serious guy, who has dedicated his life to this country. And when he says these kind of things, it lets me sit up and listen. And he echoed kind of what the other generals have said that worked for Trump. General Milley, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that absolutely Trump was a wannabe dictator. Also, that you had a Secretary of Defense said the kind of the same thing. That's biggest thing for me. General Kelly saying that the guy puts his own interest ahead of the national interest, that he would want to rule with a single fist instead of, having checks and balances, things of that nature. That scares me because those are things I don't think this country, once we lose who we are as a democracy or a democratic republic, I don't think we can get it back.
Well, so let me flip it around the other way. I'll tell you a side that scares me for the Democratic Party. We have Joe Biden, who came out to do the first debate. It was a disaster. I mean, we can definitely see cognitive decline in the man. Major difference in what we saw 5 years ago.
He was
Hold on.
He was sick.
I hear you. But how can they go through? Well, they pulled him off the ballot. Okay. Completely pulled him off. And then they want to say that, no, he's fine. He's fine.
Yeah.
But yet, why did you pull him off the ballot? And to what level? And we don't know.
Yeah.
But there is a level of concealment, of hiding away where he was at with his mental faculties, what was going on. And it was exposed. I mean, I don't know. And I'm not trying, listen, I don't want to see anyone go through any health problems whatsoever, mental illness to whatever degree. I'm not making fun of the guy at all. But it was hidden. And it's a scary thing for me, Chris, to sit here and look at the other party. So, I mean, I guess you can go back and say tit for tat, but what scares me also is who's running the country. And Harris is like, no, he's fine. He's great. Then it's like, how could you accept the position and not back Biden? Because he really didn't back him. Pelosi didn't back him. Humer didn't back him. They went after him. He's been hidden. And the Republicans were saying it for a while. They're like, hey, he really has a problem. I talked to a Congressman, Andy Ogles, told me himself that Biden was talking to him and he was totally disconnected. Not making fun of him. He said he has got some cognitive issues. This was before.
I would say Andy Ogles has some cognitive issues too.
Yeah, but that's just a personal
That's
shot. That's
story.
going back to a personal shot. What we're talking about is he was really fading off in a conversation. I'm not talking about the fact he didn't agree with his policies or there was really some issues there. I think after looking at that debate, I think everyone could see there was issues there. He had a hard time keeping focused, keeping his train of thought. Compare it to 5 years ago. Compare him to 3 years ago. If you can't see a cognitive decline there, and that's been hidden, Chris.
I think
That's been tucked away.
I mean, you talk to anybody that's worked with him, even members of the military, and even Kevin McCarthy, the former speaker, said that in the conversations he had with Biden was sharp. He had a great dialogue with him. I think the thing that Biden looks old, I'll give you that. I mean, he doesn't walk as fast, and he had a broken
He's an
foot.
elderly man.
He's 81 years old. He's not as fast as he was. He's not as slick as he was when he talks. There's a lot of things as we get older we don't do as well.
Sure.
But people that's around him on a regular basis, you can't find one that says that he's in mental decline. I mean, the country,
Well, then why did they pull him off the ballot?
I think most of them, especially like Nancy Pelosi, and I've made it clear I disagreed with when they did it. I didn't like how it was done. I thought he deserved to be on the ballot. I think they were concerned that he would lose because most people saw, and image is everything in politics now, that they would see the Joe Biden of that debate. And Biden admitted he had a bad debate. And, after they kept pushing and pushing, Pelosi and Schumer and all of them saying that he needed to drop out because Donald Trump would win, I think he was convinced that if he stayed in the race, the issue of the race would be his.
Well, they turned on him.
They did.
They absolutely turned on Joe
Lost
Biden.
a lot of respect for Nancy Pelosi and a lot of Democrats because
Sure.
14 million Democrats across the country voted for Joe Biden to be our nominee, and they basically forced him out. I didn't like it. I thought the guy, I make no bones about it. I'm a fan of Joe Biden. He's been good to my family, but I thought it was unfair to him as a person. and it was
It's
unfair.
unfair to the American voter.
It is. I mean, it's undemocratic. I
Um,
did not like how it was done.
but at the end of that, though, when people talk about, oh, I got fear of this, I got fear of that. I have a fear of they concealed this. And you can say, well, I don't have a point or I do. People could argue that both ways. But regardless of the fact, this was hidden from the American public. Whatever his decline is, there's a lot of people saying that he wasn't declined. I'll give you, there are people in the party saying he's fine.
Yeah.
But a lot of people had met him and said, I see a difference from when I met him 8 years ago
Yeah.
and when I knew him 4 years ago. Well, I witnessed that. You can't say that that didn't happen. I witnessed that actually happen. And well, that's just a moment of being physically fatigued and being ill. That happens with elderly people, and we see that happen, especially late in the evening,
Yeah.
late at night. It starts to happen. It gets harder for them.
Happens to me too.
Well, it happens to the older folks, and it was a scary thing to me to say, who's running the country right now? Who's doing that? So, I get it. So we all come in with fears on our side.
I'm reading Bob Woodward's new book right now. It's called War. It just came out, and Woodward's books always go inside the administration, and if there's an election going on, and most of the time they're very critical of the president that he's covering, like George Bush, Trump, Clinton. He's been critical of all of them, but he was very appreciative of the Biden administration and said that Biden's problems were not any cognitive issues; it was physical. He had gotten older. He had lost a step as far as his walking. He just looked old and frail. But behind the scenes, he was all there. He was commanding. He was in charge. And when people like that make their living on making controversies with presidents and members of or politicians, when they say something like that, I listen because Woodward's not covering for him. I mean, for God's sakes, he's taken down presidents. He took down Nixon in the 70s with Watergate. He dinged Clinton a lot with Monica Lewinsky and all those scandals. So he had no incentive to cover for Biden. But that's just another testament right there that from a neutral person that said that Biden is all there and has really been a good president.
So I'm going to tell you what I think about the entire thing, and then we can move on because we're beating a dead horse. But I really believe the extreme left saw an opportunity to take the Democratic Party, and I think they pounced. And I think they successfully removed the moderates out of the party. So we don't care what your opinion is.
Yeah.
And I think the extreme left has tried a political experiment. I've said this before. And I think it's going to fail. I think ultimately at the end of this, I think Joe Biden had a better chance of beating Donald Trump than Harris. That's
Very well
my
could
opinion.
have.
That's my opinion.
We're going to see in a week, and if for some reason Kamala Harris loses, I'm gonna say I told you so because I felt the same way. I thought Joe Biden, he's the only person in U.S. political history that has beaten Donald
Well,
Trump.
think about this. Harris, whenever they would say, Trump, or I'm sorry, that Biden was not going to be on the ballot.
Yeah.
The Republican Party would say, "Great, give us Harris."
Yeah.
I mean, that's on camera. I mean,
Yeah.
that's recorded. The Republican Party was like, "Oh yeah, give us Harris." Even the Republican Party felt like that she was more of a beatable candidate than Joe Biden.
Biden
Period.
has a certain appeal, kind of like Trump, to working class people. He's from Scranton, Pennsylvania. He didn't grow up rich. He appeals to working class folks. And, I worry about that right now. The Democratic Party's turning into a party of elites, of college educated folks that have higher income. And that's not the Democratic Party of yesteryear. It's not the Democratic Party that I grew up with, frankly. We've got to start appealing to the average person again,
Yeah.
not just in big cities, but in small rural counties like this. We can, on election night, I'm going to make this prediction. If Kamala Harris gets beat in these small rural counties like Lawrence County, 85-15, consistently across the board and across the country, she's going to be in real trouble because you just can't keep maximizing the big cities, all these votes. I mean, it's just not going to happen. You have to be competitive in these small areas and play to everybody's vote, not just those elites in the party and in the country.
I
So-
agree. I've got a couple things I want to go over too. I
Sure.
know we have not talked about the economy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really like to brag about on this particular program is we try to cover different topics every time we've come in. And, we've got a couple more shows that we're going to put together. Hopefully we can get more topics. Next week, we want to have some fun. It's before election night. We'll have some fun with it. But, I mean, we've not talked about the economy.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear some of your thoughts. I even went today and printed out some things off of Harris's page. Okay. And I actually wanted to define the word economy.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's important sometimes. I'm a word guy. Economy, the definition is the process by which goods and services are produced, sold, and bought in a country. Okay. So that's it. Um, we look at where we were a few years ago, and I'm gonna throw some things at you, and you just can fire back whatever you think.
Mm.
But if you look this up, I think I looked it up on nerdwallet.com or some
Yeah.
one of those websites. Food prices are up 28% in the last 5 years.
Mhm.
I mean, we don't have to go to NerdWallet to see that.
Yeah.
I stopped at a grocery store. It wasn't here in this county, but it was in one of our neighboring counties. I'm not trying to slander any grocery stores, but I stopped there and a gallon of milk in one of our neighboring counties was $5.19. Okay. And it was a store brand
It's ridiculous.
for that. $5.19. That's what I paid just a few days. And for folks that don't know, I've got 6 kids, 5 still at home. So we can put away some $5 a gallon milk at our house.
I'd love
So
you.
food is up. Gas prices are up 30% in 5 years. Okay. This is where we are. This one got me, and I'm seeing this with my own son. I'm kind of throwing him out there. He might get me later and say, "Dad, don't be talking about me." But I'm watching this younger generation and looking for a place to live. And he's 21. He just turned 21. He's a young guy. He's working hard.
Yeah.
But the dollar doesn't go very far. And home prices have risen 423% in the past 40 years.
Hmm.
In 1984, the median home price was $79,000. Okay. 2023 was $417,000. We're not making these numbers up.
Yeah.
We're not seeing a 400% increase in our income in the last 40 years.
Yeah.
So things are happening. We've got to talk about the economy. Harris has got a plan. Trump has got a plan.
Does he?
Well, he's got tariffs. And I want to hear, I really want you to fire back on this.
I can remember being in Chuck Barnett's class over at a high school talking about tariffs, talking about how they were imposed, in the early 1900s. And I think, if I can remember correctly, he basically said that's a tax on the people. And everything that I've ever heard about tariffs is that they're paid by the citizens. I just don't see how this is not an additional tax on the American people when Donald Trump's wanting to level. He even said a 2,000% tax on everything from China.
60%.
Well, he said 2,000% the other day. He said he wants to go as high as he can. And at the end of the day, the American people are the ones that's going to be paying this. China's not going to be paying. They may be paying it, but it's going to be passed on to U.S. consumers.
So let's talk about a few things. Let's talk about the economy. And listen, man, I'm just no country boy, but I paid a lot of taxes.
Yeah.
And I've worked hard my entire life. Okay. I started working when I was 16 years old, and I haven't taken much time off since then. Raised a family, and we worked hard. Thank God for my wife, Rebecca. We work together. I don't want to take credit for everything, but we work hard, and I don't need someone to tell me about taxes. I really pay enough of them.
Yeah.
I tell you, I'm from the grocery store to working on my car that we were just talking about. I know about paying some taxes, but I'm going to tell you where I think one of the big things, and it's not just the tariffs of the 1900s. And I don't even think that's a fair comparison, because in the 1990s, we had a lot of industry in Middle Tennessee. We had garment factories all over this area. And
You're
people
going to
worked.
say NAFTA.
Oh, NAFTA is one of them, but we exported jobs.
I'm not going to disagree with that.
So what we did was we overstepped, and we handed jobs to countries that don't have labor laws, Chris.
I agree.
And we're
Not a level
trying to
playing field.
compete. It's not. And so what's happened? What has happened? So our pay didn't keep up pace.
Right.
Why did our income not keep up pace with the inflation of the housing? See, it would be okay if houses went up 400% if your pay had gone up 400%. But when we started exporting these jobs right here in our county, in Lawrence County, there's empty factories where people used to work.
It's almost like trickle down economics doesn't work. It never trickles down to people that need it.
Well, the thing about the tariffs is we've got to correct. Think about this. We've got to correct the fact that you've got people in Mexico that are making televisions and for $2 a day. How can we compete with that? How can we compete with that here in our country if they're going to export all the jobs? Where are we going to work? How are we going to provide for our families? Now, the economy, and that's why I want to read the definition of economy. It is the process by which goods and services are produced, sold, and bought in a country. Our country was solid, much more solid economically speaking, when we were making the jeans,
Sure.
and then we go to the store and we're buying the Levi's, and Levi's were made in Perry County.
Yeah.
Okay. And we bought the lawnmower that was made in Lawrence County, and we had our own economy set up. But by putting these jobs out to countries who don't have labor laws, it's actually destroyed our incomes in this country, but yet inflation has continued to rise. There has to be a correction point on that. And I get it. So people are going to say, well, if you raise the prices of television coming in, I mean, you can go to Walmart right now and buy a TV. I was actually at Walmart like 2 days ago, I think. And I looked at the TV and I was thinking, wow, a few years ago, I paid a lot of money for a plasma. I paid $1,000 for like a 40-inch plasma a few years ago. And now $1,000 will buy you an 84-inch TV or whatever. I mean, a big TV. Now, would we have to pay more for these services? I'll tell you what I think. I think our incomes were better when we made Zenith in the United States instead of Zenith being made in Mexico.
But if you've noticed over the last 3.5 years, manufacturing's coming back to the United States. And it's in large part to a lot of the investments and legislation passed by the Biden administration, whether it be the Infrastructure Act, the investments in clean energy, the investments in battery technology. I mean, look, when you go to Nashville, the new battery plant there, I mean, you're growing by leaps and bounds. There's been 600 to 800,000 new manufacturing jobs in the United States.
We're a service-oriented economy now.
We are.
Manufacturing
The
economy.
manufacturing industry has made a revival under this administration, and it's because they have invested into the industries of the future. And under Donald Trump, manufacturing was flat. Auto industry was flat. Under this administration and under the Obama administration, it went up.
If we had Trump's policies of putting tariffs on these goods coming in, you don't think if American manufacturers could compete, we wouldn't have jobs where we were making our own TVs? We wouldn't bring those jobs. Your clothes are probably made in the Philippines or in the Dominican Republic or in China. And I'm not downing the people that are there. It's pathetic that you have superstars getting their logos put on clothing made in sweatshops.
I agree.
I would like to see the logos being put on right here in America, in Tennessee again. And we had good paying jobs in Middle Tennessee. There was a battle back in the 80s with kids that were growing up, and I didn't graduate in the 80s. I graduated in the 90s, so I got a few years on you. But the thing is people could drop out of high school and go get a job and make enough money to go buy a house and a car.
Yep.
And so it'd be like, well, why would I go ahead and finish out school? I'm going to end up going and working at these factories down the street anyway.
Yeah.
And they would, you know why they would drop out of school? Because they literally could go out and make a living. Now we're encouraging, we're like, hey, you need an education. And we know that's better. We don't encourage that. But there were people that didn't even have a high school equivalent, didn't have a GED, and they still lived in the 3-bedroom brick house. They had the new Ford in the driveway. They worked every day. They had vacation time. They had health benefits.
A lot of times those would be the jobs that they would have throughout their life.
That's exactly
They didn't
right.
bounce from job to job.
Average job lasts 3 years in America.
But you're not going to get any argument from me because I think everything in this country, we need to strive for it to be made in America for Americans. And that's the patriotic thing to do. But I just argue that Democratic presidents do it better. Bill Clinton did it better. The economy was great under Bill Clinton. Barack Obama brought us back from the catastrophe in 2008.
Well, I think NAFTA was a catastrophe. I think long-term speaking, I think it destroyed jobs. It ruined small.
Long term, I think
It has been a bad. I don't know how anyone could argue that NAFTA was a good thing. I just don't. I mean, if they want to try to figure out some way to do it, but when I drive through towns like Hohenwald, when I drive through Linden, when I drive through Waynesboro, when I see the empty buildings sitting everywhere that used to be utilized, because our economy, what's happened was our economy has shifted.
Sure.
And if we're going to compete, if our American workers are going to compete, then we cannot compete with wages of sweatshops.
Yeah.
You cannot do it. I mean, and I don't think that.
That's why labor unions are useful in this country because you can negotiate with the people that own the companies. That's why they're so valuable. You know, employers, the average worker has not been getting a fair shake in this country. The minimum wage hasn't went up in 20 years.
Hold on.
Salaries
Let
haven't
me hear what
gone
you're
up.
saying, though. The minimum wage has not gone up since we started exporting our jobs. I'm not arguing that. I'm saying
What
the
had been up
economy-
under Bill Clinton it hasn't been since 06.
Yeah, but it's like, well, I don't even know. what minimum-
725, I
Okay,
believe.
725. It was when I was a kid. It was 525.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it was when I was a teenager. But my point is, we have been exporting our jobs. If you want to get production back in America, we cannot let sweatshops be making the products and us buy them and think we're going to compete. You're not going to bring the electronic
Agree.
industry back.
Agree.
We need the electronic industry in this country back. We couldn't put chips in cars because all it was that.
You know who brought that back? Joe Biden, Chips and Science Act, which was a bipartisan piece of
It was a
legislation.
bipartisan piece of legislation because we had to have it. But you know why that had to be
Why didn't
done?
Donald Trump do it?
Because they sent all of our jobs to other countries.
Why didn't Donald Trump do it?
Donald Trump
It
didn't do it.
injected $300 million, $300 billion into manufacturing. And now we've had this manufacturing boom. Combine that with the Inflation Reduction Act, which gives all these incentives to businesses and manufacturers. These are things that
my
this
point
president has
is
done.
pathetic that our government had to get in the middle of the economy again. The government doesn't make the economy better most of the time. I mean, it's don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better if you have a market that dictates itself. Supply and demand is what works. Okay. And so here's the thing. I see somebody said, who sent the jobs overseas? Well, NAFTA was one of the first starts where that took place. I thought NAFTA was a disaster. And I saw it by the time
I
was probably
disagree with that.
30 years old. I could see the effect of NAFTA.
Yeah.
And this is something I lived. Okay. I mean, it wasn't long after NAFTA was signed until Henry I. Siegel's in Hornwall closed. Levi's in Perry County closed. And you know what? They've quit making them in this country, and they had to make. And then once the jobs started going to other countries to stay competitive, if you're going to stay competitive, you can't compete with another company that's making a pair of jeans and they're beating your price by half because they're not paying the workers.
Well, problem for years, this country have given tax cuts to businesses that moved overseas, and that's wrong. We need to be giving tax cuts to businesses
I
that bring
agree.
industry back here
Agree.
and invest in our communities like Lawrenceville.
I'm passionate about this because I look at my own children and I'm like, where are they going to work? How are they going to be able to work this economy? We are a service oriented.
But why do you think a billionaire is the man to do that?
I
He
think,
didn't do it the first 4 years. Manufacturing was flat.
well, I think 100% the tariffs is the answer. And I've thought it for, it
I
wasn't
hope I'll
Donald Trump.
campaign on that the last 4 or 5 days.
Well, here's the thing. I totally believe it. And I've thought it for a long time. I knew whenever jobs started going out of this country. See, I can remember when air conditioners were made in Colombia.
Yeah.
You know what? Those are not made in Colombia anymore. This is not something that somebody else has got to educate me on. I know where these factories are. I remember when these air conditioner places closed down. I knew the guy was the last employee that was working there. And I'm like, what's going on with the company? He told me himself, this is like 12, 15 years ago. I don't even know what year it was. And he said, well, they're moving the entire company to Mexico.
Yeah.
And they're making all the air conditioners there. And all those jobs that were in Colombia, where those guys in those days were making $25, $26 an hour,
Yeah.
are now being made by someone in another country, probably even would violate child labor laws here. There's no overtime laws there. They pay them $5 a day. It's not made Mexico better.
Yeah.
One of the things they sold the American public on is it will help the economy in Mexico. It's not. People are still coming here looking for jobs because they're so corrupt. I'm passionate
That's
about this one. If we're going to ever have a competitive, you have to make the market competitive, and you can't be competing with people that are
Steve
using
Robertson made a good point, though. Murray, Ohio originally came here because they had cheap labor, no unions. And he mentions that the word union is a bad thing around here. And I just strongly disagree. I mean, Joe Biden has been the most pro-union, pro-labor president in U.S. history, probably, maybe even outside of Teddy Roosevelt. And look what the economy's done. We've had 16 million new jobs. Wages have now outpaced.
Hold on a minute.
Let me finish. We've been able to raise wages that outpace inflation the last 2 years, and manufacturing has made a comeback. It can be done. We can invest in our workers and have a good economy. You don't have
would
to
tell
pick
you,
either one.
I think there are jobs available, but the economy is not doing well. This is the definition: process by which goods and services are produced, sold, and bought. So on the bought side, hold on, we're paying crazy high prices. You
Not gonna
cannot
disagree.
leave that price. You can't leave it. Look at this. 2023. Okay, in 2023, electricity prices jumped 6.3%. It was the highest yearly increase in the past 25 years. You cannot say that this is not part of our economy. Household income 2019, $81,210. 2022 was $80,610. All right, I don't even care about blaming an administration. Please hear me on this. We have to come together with good policies and good ideas. All right, I'm not here to point
And it
fingers.
can be done, Brandon.
look at this. The Trump tariff plan wants to put 10 to 20% tariffs on all foreign goods. Chris, if we don't raise the bar on what they're doing, they're going to export every job they can out of this country. And I'm not saying this is not going to be a quick fix,
Yeah.
but I don't want a band-aid. I want something that's going to fix this problem of countries that are taking advantage of Americans. We're a rich country. We have a lot of money, and they want to send their products that they're building dirt cheap in labor shops.
It should be a bipartisan issue.
I agree, and I'm trying to push common
But
sense.
since we're talking about this issue, let me point out that a couple of weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal, who's a right-wing Republican publication, they put out a study that compared the economic policies of Harris and Trump. And what they found was that 68% of the economists that they surveyed believed that inflation would rise faster under Trump than Harris. 65% say that Trump's policies would increase the deficits more than Harris's would. 59% of the economists predicted lower domestic manufacturing under Trump because of the proposed tariffs, while 16% said it would rise, and 45% believe the economic growth would be faster under Harris, while 37% say Trump. So the folks that do this for a living mostly agree with you guys most of the time. Think that Kamala Harris's policies on the economy are better than Donald Trump's.
I actually looked at that article.
Yeah.
And I printed you out something. This is from Harris's webpage. Okay. So I'm not making something up. And we're going to talk about this in just a second. We're going to run out of time. I can tell. We're coming up against the clock. Here's my point. I don't need someone to tell me that and then not tell me why. And they did not give the reasons on why they wrote those articles. I'm telling you, they did not explain it. And I wanted to see, okay, what's the difference? I want to take a hard look at why are they saying this? Look at just this one policy that she's got out. We talked about house prices going up. This is a bad policy for Kamala Harris. And I actually marked it on there.
Kamala.
Harris.
Kamala.
Hey, look, my fans like that. So
No. Got to throw the red meat out.
here it is. It is. As far as what they want to do, they have proposed to give a historic $25,000. And I'm reading it verbatim. Mark it for you right there. Down payment assistance, $25,000 down payment assistance to help more Americans buy their first home. Do you know what this is fixing to do to the housing market? It's going to drive the price of houses up more. You can't throw money into an economy like that and not expect it. We don't need higher house prices. I know what they're trying to do. I see the heart of what they want to do. They want to help Americans get in a home. I see that. I'm not saying that's not what they want to do, but it is going to have a negative effect where my son, who's 21, he's going to have a hard time getting a house. You can say, well, we're getting with 25,000. You're driving the house prices up. We're going to see house prices hit 500.
Why do you guys never have a problem with us giving tax breaks and all these tax cuts to the rich and corporations who are paying 0% in taxes? Amazon, 0% in taxes. Microsoft, 0% in taxes. But you guys scream and holler when we want to give $25,000 to some people to get their first house, get equity in a home.
The idea is that those will be passed on to the consumer and to the employee of those companies. Okay, that's the idea. Just like the idea is this is going to help someone get a house for give them $25,000. You give everyone in America $25,000 and tell them they can go buy a house. You're going to drive the price of houses up in America. That's just the way the economy works. Processes.
It's not what the economists say.
Well, it's Chris. If I gave everyone in this county $25,000, you would drive the price of houses up in this county. Because what you would do is you're saying, here it is. Here's your $25,000 to go use it on a house. If you can find a house you want, you're not going to be able to find housing. These are just serious issues that I have. I got another one for you. I printed you off another one. It's the same page.
Let me just say that I find it a little bit bizarre that you guys trust Donald Trump, who's filed bankruptcy 6 times personally, over well-known Nobel laureates on the economy and people that work for the Wall Street Journal. That's just kind of bizarre.
Well, I've never filed bankruptcy, and I understand how. Well, here's the thing.
He says that makes him smart, though.
So did Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey is a rich.
Not 6 times.
It's like, come on. That's a weak comparison when you're talking about policy. Okay, when you're talking about policy, he may have done some bad business deals. I know a lot of people went broke on business.
He
deals.
don't pay his workers for one thing.
Well,
and he says he don't like overtime.
But you're trying to change the subject because it's got nothing to do with that $25,000 injection into the housing market. And I hand you another one. I'm going to read it. It says on her website, and I printed it out and handed it to you. In just the past several years, we've seen insufficient resilient supply chains, in the face of disruptions from the pandemic, and then Russia invasion of Ukraine, as well as
Mhm.
lack of competition in the markets. Although inflation has significantly declined, he said that on her website.
It has.
It has not. How can inflation decline if we're paying 30 times more in fuel 5 years than we were 5 years ago?
Well, inflation absolutely has declined. It was 9% at its highest. It's 2.5 right now, and it's
Well,
been declining.
She says, according to that, you can keep reading, monthly grocery inflation at or near 0%. That's what it says on that
The
piece of paper.
problem is manufacturers and businesses are not lowering their prices. They're keeping them where they were when inflation was 9%. Inflation's down to about 2%, and prices haven't dropped. Let's start putting the blame where it's at. It's on the people that have a monopoly on meat and milk and all these. They control the pricing of it. Let's hold those people just as accountable as our politicians.
The market will adjust itself because prices
It's
will go
not.
down with supply and
You
demand.
guys trust the market. I trust workers, and I trust
I don't trust the
people.
government.
You know?
I'll tell you that.
I definitely wouldn't with a man who's declared bankruptcy
I
six
think
times.
we're getting close to the end. Look, it's hot topics. It's what's driving this election.
And we had good questions too.
Yeah, I appreciate every question. Look, I may not be able to answer every question. I
I'm
just
not
feel
an
like
expert. I'm not listening to experts.
I'm on here saying why I'm a Republican. I'm over here trying to learn from every person I can learn from. I think the people in this county care about this county. I
Yeah.
think people in this state care about this state.
They do.
I appreciate. I know we're going to run out of time, but I appreciate the conversation with you every time.
Let's make sure we tell everybody to tune in next week. It's going to be a
Yes.
fun episode.
It's going to be fun. If I got time, I want to say I lost a good friend, Jerry Geho, praying for the family.
Absolutely.
God bless.
All right. See you next week.